Hey there everybody, it's markcrilley. I'm back with another how to draw video. Before we start, I want to explain about the band-aid on my finger. My apologies, I cut my finger earlier in the week, and the very first thing I thought was, oh no, how am I going to explain this to my YouTube viewers? Such is the weird life that I live. But let's get on with this video. I'm going to be showing you how to draw what I call a snuggling pose. There's going to be a couch here, young man seated on it with his girlfriend. She's got her head against his chest. You know, I've done like a hugging pose, I've done kissing poses, but I've never done a pose quite like this one. So before we get started, I should probably mention about the dimensions of this rectangle that I'm working in. A little unusual dimension, 7 3/4 inches wide, which works out to a little under 20 centimeters. And then also this one, also a little weird, 4 1/4 inches from top to bottom. That comes out to just a little under 11 centimeters, if you want to follow along. But otherwise, just, eyeball this, get the sort of general shape of the rectangle, and you'll be good to go. I'm going to begin by drawing some guidelines for the couch. All right, so, you can come up with any sort of couch design that you like. But before we go any further, I want to put up a special warning that I've created for this video. Yes, indeed, there is going to be quite a bit of time-lapse in this video. My apologies, it's unavoidable, but I'm going to try to do at least 3 different parts of it real-time. The faces, the hands, and the clothing folds. But for now, there's going to be quite a bit of time-lapse. Bear with me. I want to do the basic guidelines of the head, the boy's head and the girl's head. All right, so a little difficult to describe the head shapes here. To me, they sort of look like upside down teardrops or something, coming to a point here at the chin. I decided to get the ears in place. It is going to be like a 3/4 view, his head tilted this way and then her head tilted down in this direction. In fact, let's go ahead and move on to getting 2 horizontal lines for placing the upper eyelashes for both of their eyes. Okay, so notice the location of this line. I'd say it's just a touch closer to the chin than it is to the top of the head. And this is just a technique for making characters look youthful. If you have the eyes and the rest of the facial features a little bit low on the head and you create a lot of space there for the forehead, I think it just sort of reminds us more of a child or almost a babyish look. So that's something to pay attention to. Now I'm going to get these vertical curving lines that are going to help us place the nose and the mouth later on. All right, so not so much to say about this, except that I would say the curving line on her face is just a little further to one side. She's going to be maybe a little closer to a profile view than he is, but only just barely. Let's go ahead, and what I want to do is suggest that his arm is coming down here and resting on the armrest. What do you know? He's resting his arm on the armrest. How brilliant of me. Let's go ahead and get those lines in place. So you can see I've put in a basic shape here for his hand. I've held off on drawing the individual fingers. I often do this, just sort of get a mitten-like shape in place before I go on to the details. And this line of his upper arm going across, I will later on put in an indication of his shoulder here, but I wanted to point out how his neck comes up and reconnects with the ear right here at the sort of base of the earlobe. I'm going to go ahead and erase some of these lines of the couch that are no longer needed. Okay, so in a minute I'm going to go ahead and get into the basic guidelines of the female character, but for now I want to draw just one line over here that's going to be sort of his leg, like he might be sitting relaxing on the couch with one leg propped up over here. So let's get that line into place. All right, so hopefully not too hard for you to get this shape here into place. Later on, I'm going to be drawing wrinkles on his, his blue jeans. But like I said, I want to do that real time. So let's go ahead and get her arm and shoulder into place. Okay, so you can see I did the same kind of a technique here, sort of making it look like a mitten or something instead of trying to draw her individual fingers. And then otherwise pay attention to how narrow the wrist is compared to how thick his wrist is. That's sort of exaggerated. I think a lot of illustrators like to emphasize the masculinity and femininity of the two characters, sometimes even in a very exaggerated way. But I thought it was interesting that the line of her neck, just like his neck, coming right off of this point of the earlobe here, and then you can maybe pay attention to from the chin inward to the other side of her neck for placing that line. Well, as I said, we're almost done with the time-lapse fest, but let's go ahead and do some basic lines for the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. So you can see how these initial guidelines helped me in terms of placing the, not the pupil, what is this? The iris of each one of his eyes, and especially this vertical line becomes very helpful in terms of getting that eye there, the tip of his nose sort of pointing right onto that line, and also his mouth. Now, part of his face is going to be obscured by her hair, so just a fair warning there on that. And now it's time to do her facial features, and then finally we will be asking Old Man Time-Lapse to leave us for a moment so that we can do some real-time drawing. Okay, so you can see I decided to give her these sort of classic manga eyes. I call them crescent moon eyes. They're just slightly curved and, you know, so happy that she just can't even keep her eyes open anymore. Notice that her nose is rather smaller than his. That's something I see artists doing sometimes. And as always, the mouth is a little closer to the nose than it is to the chin. Actually, quite a lot. I may have to make some adjustments with that. And though I had promised to knock it off with the time-lapse, I did want to have his hand on her shoulder there. So let me go ahead and do that, and that truly will be the last of the time-lapse. All right, so at last we have the basic pose in place here, and one little tip here is notice how these two lines are parallel to one another as I create yet another sort of mitten shape there. And I guess I'll go ahead and erase these guidelines. So the next thing to do, I think, is to start moving into the details of the faces, and indeed, this will finally be done in real time. And I don't know if I even need to refocus. I got the camera as close in as it can go, really. Let's begin by erasing these guidelines a little bit in terms of, you know, cleaning up the face, basically, before we get into the details of the eyes. And I'm going to begin by putting in his upper eyelash line. It is mostly going to be a little to the left, this line, of the iris that I put in there before. And, you know, the whole goal with this illustration is to present two people that are just very relaxed in one another's company. And for me, that means getting his eyelid almost sort of half closed, you know, just to give this very mellow kind of feeling. But you can see by having this line extend over to the left, this causes the appearance of him sort of gazing off contentedly into space. Now, over here, I am going to do something that I see a lot of manga artists do, and that is to kind of create a little bit of a slightly cross-eyed effect, although it doesn't really read that way for some reason. But yeah, this eye is indeed looking like it's also a little close to the inside, which would normally convey a sense of being cross-eyed, but it's just sort of a technique that I see manga illustrators use, and somehow they never do actually look all that cross-eyed. In any case, pay attention also to the eyebrows and the distance between the upper eyelash line and the eyebrows themselves. As eyebrows come down closer, you get more of a look of intensity. Of course, if you go way up high, it looks like surprise. We're kind of going for a neutral, relaxed look here. I think the nose and the mouth are kind of as detailed as they need to be. I guess what I can do is make a suggestion of a highlight here. Hope this is showing up. I know it requires a fair amount of detail. And later on, I've got plans for this video to revisit my technique that I did in that one-point perspective subway car interior. I've got an idea for this video where I can use that technique of scanning it in and printing it out. Let's go ahead and do the interior lines of the ears. I do have a video that goes into quite a lot of detail in terms of my approach for drawing the human ear, but it really comes down to two lines. One, which is sort of this sort of curly Q line that follows the edge of the ear, and then in here, the thumbs down mitten. People will think that I'm obsessed with mittens, but I came up with this shape that I call the thumbs down mitten. I guess I'll link to that video for those of you who want added explanation for my technique on drawing ears. But basically, those two lines are the key structures there, the way I draw ears. So let's just go ahead and do the same thing over here. Always begin with this first line that curves around, follows the contour, but it sort of hooks in a little bit. And then just above that, I'll draw this little shape that I call the thumbs down mitten. And that's a fairly good representation of the human ear. Now I want to, well, let's go ahead and start drawing one of these hands. I'm going to refocus the camera. All right, so hands are notoriously difficult to draw, and that's why I wanted to make sure that this part was done real time. I find that it's helpful to begin by dividing this mitten-like shape into 4 roughly equal lines as I begin to sort of strategize towards drawing the actual fingers. I want to make sure that they are evenly spaced. So I just begin with some very, fairly crude lines here that that break that space up for me. Now, I find it very helpful to pay attention to the length of each finger, and this middle finger I always draw first, just my approach. And though the digits, is that the right term? The finger actually divides into 3 joints. I tend to just draw them almost as if there were only 2 joints to each finger. So that's a simplification that I employ. It helps me, and who knows, hopefully you guys can benefit from that approach as well. But notice that I have, as is the case in real life, this middle finger is the longest. These next 2 fingers are the second longest, and they are the pointer finger and the ring finger are almost the same size, same length, I should say. And that's why, that's why I sort of drew this shape the way I did, so as to anticipate the getting the proper length of each one of these fingers. And then the pinky is the very shortest of all, and rather dramatically shorter than those other 3 fingers. And there you have it, hopefully. People are always saying, boy, it's so hard to draw hands. And you know what? I hear you. I find it hard to draw hands. I'm always struggling drawing hands. One thing I'm going to do here is just get a little hint of his thumb back here. And maybe I can add just slight indications for his knuckles up here. And maybe just a little hint of a line that comes along here for adding definition to his hands. But I don't want to get carried away with details here. Just sort of, it's enough, I think, to get the basic guidelines in place. Now let's move on to drawing her fingers. And as I said, artists are often exaggerating the male versus female dynamic. And so her fingers, I'm going to draw in, sort of more slender, classically feminine style. And one thing I'm going to do is to have her pinky sort of break away a little. That sounds painful. Her pinky broke away, man. No, just to create a sort of a look of elegance here, I think just have a little gap in there between her pinky and the other 3 fingers. And then also, with this idea of a female character maybe having nicer nails, certainly way nicer nails than I have, but then again, everyone on Earth has nicer nails than I have. But putting a little bit of a point to those fingers can suggest that she's got nice long nails. And let's see here, having done that, I think I can get the thumb in place back here. Always dropping the thumb back pretty far compared to the rest of the fingers. And later on, I'm going to have her wearing a sweater that is sort of, the sleeve is extra long and coming up here very near to her fingers. But I'm not going to bother drawing the knuckles and so forth. I think the more lines you put in, the less elegant her hands will look, actually. So I feel like I'm done with that. And happily, there's only one more hand to do. Let's go over here and get to this one. I'll use my same technique here of sort of getting some very basic dividing lines in place to anticipate the 4 different fingers. And I think this time, with his hand resting upon her upper arm, I'm going to have almost every finger split a little bit away. But I'll show you something, and I bet some of you have noticed artists doing this. Sometimes you do see the middle finger and the ring finger drawn in a way where they seem kind of close together. And I'll erase this to make it a little more clear. And then quite a gap as we come down to the pinky. Almost in the manner of Spock from Star Trek telling us to live long and prosper. There's something about this formation with the fingers that is kind of, I guess, again, elegant, sort of classically elegant looking. And so I've picked it up, mainly from other illustrators. I wonder if it even exists in real life. Do people really, it's kind of hard to do when you put your hands out like that. But I do see illustrators doing this fairly frequently. Let me go ahead and I'll do a slight indication of knuckles as I did before, maybe just a little hint of a line across there. And his sleeves are not going to come all the way up close to his knuckles the way her sweater does over here. But I guess that gets us where we need to be. Now I'm going to refocus and maybe talk just a little bit about the hair in real time, although I don't want that to be the focus of this video. All right, so I'm just going to get the very most basic guidelines in here for the hair. I would encourage you to come up with your own hairstyles, indeed plug your own character that you've created into this pose. But I suppose I can just say for a moment this idea of leaving the eyes unobstructed. That's something that I always like to do, although I know I've heard from some people who like to have a character where one of the eyes is covered. I don't know if both. I guess there are some characters that have both eyes covered with their hair. But the other thing that I always do is get a little bit of a gap here above, his already large cranium. We are adding full-bodied hair on top of that, and so we end up with really quite an exaggerated, proportion in terms of his head, and the facial features are quite low indeed on the head, accentuating, I believe, youthfulness. I'm pretty sure that's what that's about. So he's going to have sort of slightly longish hair, not too long. But I want to save time for getting into the clothing wrinkles. So I would encourage you to go ahead and just make it your own, come up with your own hairstyles. But let's show you my plans for her hairstyle. And like I said, her hair is going to be coming in front of his face a little bit, obscuring just the other side of his cheek. And just like I did with the male character, the female character, I'm also drawing this line at a distance from that initial head of the top of her skull. I'm going to have her have quite long hair that comes down, maybe connects right around his knuckle there. And I thought it would be interesting if, her hair is reacting a little bit to his chest. The curvature of the strands of hair is reflecting the fact that she's laying her head against his chest. And so, if indeed she has this sort of long hair, I'm going to have that sort of flowing down his chest, almost like a river of hair flowing down his chest. And, not too much more to say about this. Later on, I'm going to get into more details of, her bangs. Very often, people have seen this in my videos before, this long strand of hair coming down along the side of the cheek, between the ears and the eyes. A very common thing to see in manga illustrations, and I think also in real life. Certain hairstyles for women will allow a strand of hair to fall down there. Although I don't know if the ear pops out through the hair quite as much in real life as we often see in illustrations such as this. Well, bear with me. Oh, wait a minute. I guess I'll show that her hair is going to come all the way down here past his hand. And there'll be a few strands down there. But I want to go ahead and finish up the hair in time-lapse. Bring old man time-lapse back in here just to get the details of the hair right. And then, again, I'll come back and do some real-time for getting all the clothing wrinkles. Okay, so that's all in place now. I wanted to point out, I realized that I had forgotten to add these folds of the upper eyelids with her, that I do think sort of, and a few more eyelashes here at the edges of each one of her eyes. I think that adds a little something to it. And I'm going to refocus now so that we can get back into drawing the clothing. And as I said, I'm going to try to do all of these clothing folds and wrinkles real time. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is put a curving line down here for just the indication of a pillow, like a throw pillow, giving him crucial support for his lower back. And then over here we're going to get the collar of his shirt in place. So unfortunately that means I do need to erase a little bit there. And as I said, I was going to take this straight line that I'd put in place earlier and try to give a little more of an indication of his shoulder. Let's go ahead and put this here. Now, in terms of the collar, it does sort of end up looking a little bit like a rectangle, doesn't it, as it comes down here. And I've always noticed with men's shirts that there is sort of a, you know, a right angle type of a piece of cloth, at least on some shirts, that comes in right there. And I'm going to put one line at least here that comes out and begins to suggest wrinkles forming in the shirt. There will be quite a few of those. Never fear. Wrinkle fans, you're going to see plenty of wrinkles here today. But in terms of taking this contour here and making it suggest his shoulder, just kind of bring that line up like that. I think that's going to go a long way towards conveying shoulderness in that area. And then, you know, in terms of trying to expand this beyond a video that's just about this particular pose, I want to talk a little bit about clothing folds and how they form, and trying to imagine what direction they would head in. Drawing the cuff of the shirt is always an easy one. You just sort of, you know, you don't have to worry about wrinkles there, and that's why I put that in place first. But then I try to sort of use my imagination to think, well, what direction will the cloth be going in? Is it going to be going like this? Probably not, because of his elbow jutting out like here in this direction. I imagine cloth that begins sort of tugging in that direction toward the elbow. And sometimes a wrinkle can have a little bit of a hook to it. Sounds like I'm talking about pop music. Hey, this wrinkle has a really pretty good hook to it, man. In any case, imagining things in terms of the almost physics of the cloth will help you go a long way towards figuring out where these wrinkles go. But like, for example, over here, I do sort of think that the cloth is probably going to be bunching up a little bit down in the area of his armpit, and so I imagine curving lines that head down in that direction. Just sort of makes sense to me. Now, sometimes you can interrupt your contour, as I'm doing right here, and have just a little bit of a sharp bump come out, and that to me gives the feeling of a wrinkle that's extending all the way across. And we'll see if we can do it. Well, here, I'll do this over here on her wrist. I'm interrupting that, then I'm sort of creating a slightly sharp little bump there in the contour. And having done that, I'm going to do a secondary line that sort of just doesn't connect to it, but sort of points toward it. And to me, that sort of gives the feeling of a wrinkle in her sweater. Speaking of which, for a sweater, I always like to give a series of lines down here at the end. That's sort of my shorthand for saying sweater. She's wearing a sweater. And As for where wrinkles form on her arm, certainly at the elbow. I mean, this is just, you could see this in photo reference. This is where the wrinkles tend to form, right around the elbow. And again, using my imagination, I'm starting to think, well, maybe a wrinkle would go right across, like so, as it heads up toward her upper arm. So a lot of it is based on observation, and if you do enough observation, enough practice, you begin to be able to sort of imagine where the wrinkles will form, what direction they will be pointing in. I do have other videos on this subject, clothing folds and wrinkles. It's been a while since I did one. Maybe it's time to revisit that theme. But I'll try one more time this little technique of interrupting the contour with just a sharp little outdentation. It's not an indentation, it's an outdentation, to give the feeling of a wrinkle in her sweater. And I always like to get some indication of the seam. Oh, that's the word, that forms in the sweater, usually just below the actual line of the shoulder very often. Don't want to get too exaggerated with that. But then, again, around the shoulder is where we see more wrinkles sort of curving, bunching up down there, and so that's where I'm going to add in a few more lines. As for the rest of his shirt, well, I think there's going to be the two sides of the shirt need to join one another right down the middle of his chest, but I want to get at least one big wrinkle across here that interrupts that those two lines, and they would kind of curve down and then continue. See what I'm doing there? Like so. And then I really do think that we're going to have quite a lot of sort of horizontally oriented lines that are really tugging right across his chest. And I confess I'm kind of just winging it at this stage, dropping in a variety of lines that just hopefully are going to not be too far off the mark in terms of where wrinkles would really form. The truth is, wrinkles, clothing folds in real life are insanely complex, and if you drew them the way they really are in a lot of photographs and stuff, it would almost be distracting. It depends on the material, of course, but some materials just erupt into loads and loads of wrinkles, or even like blue jeans can have an awful lot of wrinkles in them. And if you try to draw every one of them, you may, rather than being rewarded with a sense of realism, it just can become a little distracting. So sometimes you're simplifying things as an artist to make it more visually attractive. Well, I think we are nearing the end. I don't want to go overboard with the wrinkles, and I fear I kind of am at this stage, so it may be time to stop. But what I'm going to do quickly in time-lapse is get a little more detail into the couch before I move on to this final stage of scanning it into the computer. Oh, you know what I forgot to do was talk about his leg here. Let's do this as fast as possible. You're definitely going to get wrinkles around the knee. Let's get a hem. Is that the hem? Stitch, seam. You'd think I'd know this by now. But I always like when drawing blue jeans to get that seam in there. And when you get to this area near the knees, to have it sort of break up that seam, the line of the seam, sort of shatter it a little because of all the wrinkles that occur there. And yeah, my apologies to those of you who are falling asleep as I draw each and every wrinkle here, but I did want to at least make this a video that goes beyond, a little bit beyond this, here, draw this exact pose, to more of general advice on drawing wrinkles. And this, again, I'm just sort of imagining in what direction would the material be sort of pulled, and across his thigh here, it seems reasonable to me that that would be the direction it would be heading in. And maybe that finally brings us to the end of the clothing fold bit. Like I said, I'm in time-lapse. I'm going to quickly add just a little more detail to the surface of the couch. All right, well, we're nearly ready to go into the final stage here. I did want to point out that I gave her a little bit of a turtleneck here. And, oh, you know, we should put slight indications of fingernails here. I think it does look a little weird if there's no fingernails at all. I tried to be subtle and not go real dark with the lines of fingernails. They do tend to call a little too much attention to themselves if you delineate them in a super dark way. All right, well, what we're going to do now is scan this into my computer. I'm going to print it out, but with a little bit of a twist on what I did last time. Let me just go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back with this image, the contrast heightened, and then printed out on ordinary office paper. Oh, hey guys, I realized I almost forgot. This is one of these rare instances where I need to do the blushies now. I can't put it off until the end of the video, so let's go ahead and get those blushies in place, because heaven knows my viewers would not stand for this illustration not having blushies. Okay, so we got those in place. Let's go ahead and move on to the next stage in the illustration process. All right, well, you can see the little trick that I had up my sleeve. I decided not only to heighten the contrast, but to give it a little rose-colored tint in keeping with Valentine's Day, and that will allow me to pull out the old gouache, my Valentine's gouache, and add some highlights to this illustration. Now, one thing that's interesting, and I kind of did this in that subway interior a few weeks back, is there's not a whole lot of shading in this illustration. It's really just line art. But I find that when you take line art like this and add gouache to it, especially when there's this just a little bit of a base color to the paper, this very light pink, you end up with what looks to me like a slightly ethereal, almost like they're in heaven or something kind of feeling. And I think part of that is the fact that there's no shading. There's no really dark parts to the illustration. It's all very light. And somehow I feel like when you add in the white gouache highlights, well, everyone knows I believe everything needs white gouache highlights. But I do think this is especially effective in terms of conveying this this ethereal quality. So that was kind of my plan all the way along. And let's see, I'll drop in a little bit, try to do a little bit more of this in real time. Maybe say a word or two about if you decide to use this technique, you do have to think about your light source. And I'm kind of imagining that the light is coming from a window that is maybe just above them, maybe slightly behind the light source coming from behind, so that we're going to get a lot of light on the top of everything, basically a little line, a shimmer of light that comes across the tops. But I thought maybe her whole face might be slightly obscured by shadow, and really all we'll do is add a bit of classic highlight to her hair. It's sort of funny, I'm realizing now that I had put this sort of linear highlight on his hair, and I didn't do that to her. So I think really the solution to that is to obliterate a little bit of the line there on the fly, so as to make these two styles of hair highlight match one another. But hopefully that gives you a little taste of what this technique is like if you have white paint, any opaque white paint in the house. I'm always using white gouache, but I think even like poster paint probably, if you've diluted it enough to the right consistency, you should be able to pull off some of these effects. So let's go ahead and kick it into time-lapse and finish things up with these highlights, and then I'll be back with a few final words. Alright, well, there's my video on how to draw a snuggling pose. I hope you enjoyed it, but before I go, I always like to thank anyone who has supported me by getting any of my books, like Brody's Ghost or Miki Falls, my graphic novel series, as well as Mastering Manga and Mastering Manga 2. It's been a while since I pointed out that it's not only available in English, but also French, German, and Spanish, as well as a few other languages. I really am greatly appreciative of anyone who supports me by picking up any of those books. But I just wanted to add a couple of more touches before I wind things down on this video. I was careful not to do it prior to bringing out those books. People are like, do you ever worry about smearing the artwork when you bring the books? Well, with this one I definitely did. I didn't want to like have the book slide across the gouache and ruin the illustration. But anyway, let me know what you thought of this video and of this technique of printing things out of the computer. This is the second one I've done using this technique. I really do like the effect, and if you like it as well, I may do other videos like it in the future. But I think it's time for me to lay down this brush. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back with another one real soon.